Hi everyone, my name is Laura Worden. I'm one of your librarians at the Broome Library. Welcome to Finals Destress Virtual Activity. Today's activity, how to make a chocolate cake with a can of Coke. So I'm using a Coke for this recipe because one, it was what was in my fridge, and two, I like to add cinnamon to my chocolate box cakes, and Coca-Cola has a cinnamon flavor to it. But you could also make this recipe with a Pepsi, or if you don't want the sugar, you can make it with a Diet Pepsi or a Diet Coke. You could also do brownies, chocolate brownies with a Coke or a Diet Coke. You could use 7-Up to make a chocolate cake as well, or the brownies. You could make this recipe using white cake or yellow cake and adding either a 7-Up or a lemon flavored 7-Up to give it a lemon flavor. If you had an orange soda, you could make an orange flavored cake. If you wanted to get real wild, you could make a spice cake using Dr. Pepper. So whatever kind of carbonated soda you have around and what flavors you're interested in. But any of those would work. Just has to be a carbonated soda. So there's only two things you need to look at this box. The temperature of the oven and what to do with the cake pan. Because we're only using the cake mix and the Coke to make this recipe. No other ingredients are required. So the other thing you need to do before you get started is to grease the bottom of your 9x13 pan. So I've pre-greased my pan just on the bottom. You can use a cooking spray, butter, margarine, whatever you have in the house, and just grease the bottom. Not too much, but enough to cover the bottom. So in addition to the pan, I also have a mixing bowl, and you have the option of using either a whisk or a spoon or a fork. You could make all of this in the 9x13 pan. You could mix it in here. It's a little bit more difficult. I prefer to use a bowl, but you could do it in the pan. If you do it in the pan, I recommend using a fork because it's easier to get the cake batter mixed in real well. But for this, I'm going to use a bowl just as more comfortable. If, like I said, if you don't have a whisk, a spoon, dinner fork, whatever you got in the house, will work just fine. I should point out too, I have one other tool. I have a spatula just to help me scrape the bowl, but you don't necessarily need a spatula. Whatever tool you're using to stir it, you can use to scrape it into the pan itself. Okay, so first step in this process is open up the box and pull out the cake mix. Now remember, we only need 2 ingredients here. And if you have trouble opening up the cake mix, grab a scissors to do it. Okay, I'm just going to pour the whole thing into the mixing bowl here. Okay, let's stick my wicks in, just kind of push it down a little bit so it's a little bit flatter. And then I'm going to grab my can of Coke. Now here's the thing about whatever soda you're using. You don't need the whole can. You only need around 10 ounces. So don't pour the whole thing in there. Leave a little bit extra. And the benefit of leaving a little extra, especially since you don't need it, is that if you stir this and it starts to get dry before you get it in the pan, you have that little extra that you can pour back into the cake mix to liven it up a little bit. Because the longer it sits, if you let the cake mix sit too long, it starts to dry out. So that little extra is there in case you need it, but you don't need to use the whole can. Okay, so I'm going to start just pouring this in. Y'all can see that. I haven't quite poured all 10 ounces in. I just want to stir it a little bit. Okay, last of my 10 ounces in there. And it's an eyeball or feel thing for how much is still in the can. Okay, so I'm going to stir this up. You got to stir it real good because you've got to get all of that cake mix mixed into the soda. You don't want any powder left over. So stir this up really good. This is why I find it easier to do it in a bowl. Like I said, you could do it in a cake pan. Stir this up really good. You can kind of scrape the sides, any powder that might be there. And as you can see, if you've ever made a cake before, it's starting to very much look the same as if you had put all 3 eggs, plus water, plus oil in here. But we only used about 10 ounces of Coke. Okay, I think that looks good. So I'm going to shake off my whisk. And the nice thing is, you could eat this batter and not worry about eating raw egg. So if you have people who like to lick the bowl, they're safe to do so, because there's no risk from the raw egg. Okay, got that off. Put this over here. Okay, got that out of the way. And my pan over here. And I'm going to tip it. Start pouring that in. You can see that. So you guys can see it a little bit more. Okay. I'm going to get the spatula here and just scrape the bowl clean. That's pretty good. Get that out of there. Okay. And I'm just going to take the spatula. You could use a fork. Could use the whisk if you wanted to. Just going to spread this around evenly as best I can. And I'm no rocket scientist or cake wizard, so I'm just going to do the best I can spreading this around. Okay. I think that looks pretty good. Extra chocolate there. Okay, so one trick I learned from my mother is to kind of just tap the cake a little bit. Make sure you get out any bubbles. There's not too many bubbles in this because we use the can of Coke. I just wanted to tap it a little bit. Okay, so that's ready to go, and I'm going to stick it in the oven for, let's see, according to my box, I'm going to stick it in there for 30 minutes. I know this cake can get really moist, so most likely in 30 minutes it won't be ready, but in 30 minutes I'll be back to check it and to show you how it looks. And don't forget, set a timer so you don't forget it's in there. Before our timer goes off, I want to point out that I pulled out some pot holders. You're going to want to have a pot holders handy to pull this when you go to check your cake. And what you're going to do after the initial 30 minutes, you're going to want to check to see how done the cake is, either with a butter knife or if you have them, a toothpick. And the idea is you want to put this in the center of the cake and have it come out fairly clean. If it's not coming out clean, then you're going to want to do it for an additional time. My box recipe says to do it for another 5 minutes. So this initial round is 30 minutes. If that's not enough, I'll put it in for additional 5. Everyone, my timer is about to go off. Now normally I would just slide the cake partially out of the oven and check it's done this. But in this case, I'm actually going to pull it out so you can see what the cake looks like while I check it. And there goes my timer. Whenever you're checking a cake, make sure you're very careful because the oven is very hot. As is the pan, and it's easy to burn yourself. Okay, and as I said, I'm going to check the center of the cake to see if this is done. If it is, it should come out clean. And my knife has come out clean, so this cake is now officially done. So I'm going to let this sit. Before I do anything else though, I'm going to shut off my oven. We don't need it anymore. And I'm going to let this cake sit for probably at least 2 hours. It needs to be thoroughly cooled before you add something like icing. So in about 2 hours more, I can add just a store-bought icing is what I've got right here. If you don't want an icing, you don't have to have it. You can treat it like a brownie. If you want to use this for finals, you know, snacks and stuff, I recommend either doing it the night before you're going to study or early in the morning so that by the time you get around to studying, it's thoroughly cooled and you can add icing. So when this is done cooling, I'll ice it and then I'll show you what it looks like. And take a taste and let you know what it tastes like. See you in a few. Alright everybody, this is the final piece with the cake all nice and frosted. So I'm going to cut a slice out of this. Some of you may be wondering why it didn't rise as much as you might think. Well, this pan was slightly bigger than I originally thought. It's a little more than 13 inches. So it didn't rise quite as high. If you want a cake to rise more, you're going to want to use a smaller cake pan. But if you have quite a few people, a large cake pan might be good because you want to make sure you have enough slices of cake. Okay, it did stick a little bit, despite my efforts with the greasing the pan. That's okay. As you can see, here it is. It's nice and moist. I'm going to take a taste. And it tastes really good. Just like a cake made normally with water, oil, and eggs. In this case, all we used was a can of Coke and a cake mix. Thanks for watching. Bye.